Part two. Hi guys. Hi. How are you?
Hi, Katia. How are you?
Good. Long time no see.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I love your hair. It's so beautiful.
Thank you so much. It's kind of old. It's growing out. I need to redo it, but I have a little surprise for October, like a new color.
Nice, nice.
How are you doing today?
Good. It's been a busy week and busy day, but
Yeah.
very productive. So I'm really happy.
I love your glasses. Are they new?
Yeah, they are. These are actually thrifted, so I'm
Ah,
happy that I didn't have to like spend a ton of money.
damn. And you just got the lenses done?
Yeah, these were sunglasses, and then I just got like my prescription.
Or
So yeah. Oh, I do see that one of my friends joined. I'm so happy. She's a social worker, so shout out to Sasha.
Shout out to Sasha. Well, thank you guys for watching
Hmm.
Brave Pod special episode part two. Ah,
Hmm.
So this month is Suicide Awareness Month. We're here with Helen to talk a little bit about mental health and how to take care of yourself, and
Hmm.
just a little bit about like what everyone's kind of going through, how they're feeling.
Hmm.
So if any of you guys don't know, this is the Brave House. The Brave House is a nonprofit organization in Brooklyn that supports immigrant girls ages 16 to 24. And yeah, we provide holistic support, uh,
Hmm.
legal support. We used to have lots of events pre-COVID, and now we're here live talking to you guys.
Yes, everything is now remote. It's really
Yeah,
hard.
yeah. So earlier today we had a discussion of how like being remote impacts a lot of people. Um,
Hmm.
I don't want to say the same sort of thing, but just to kick off the conversation, how a lot
Hmm.
of people are now forced to be separate from others, and that how
Hmm.
that plays a role in their mental health. I feel like other
Hmm.
people keep each other going, and
Yeah.
group activities, and now they're kind of like stuck at home in their own rut. They're disconnected from others. They're disconnected from their friends. They can't go to school. Some of the younger kids,
Hmm.
they're graduating. So it's tough. It's tough. It's COVID. A lot of people are losing their jobs. A lot of people are losing family,
Hmm.
loved ones.
Hmm.
And so it's a tough month already. And yeah,
Hmm.
what advice do you have for anyone who's kind of like struggling right now?
Yeah, so it's been quite a lot like the beginning of this year. So for me as a therapist working with like immigrant folks, immigrant adults to undocumented folks, and survivors of gender-based violence, it they've there's been like a lot of risk, right? And so accessibility is definitely one. So like if we're talking about like suicide prevention or just like prevention and like access to mental health services, I think that a piece that could really use like public support is like how do we also support folks who do have like suicide ideation, because it's also like not easy. I've definitely have worked with people who are like who have experienced ideation, like suicide ideation, and how can you support them when they're in that state without like judgment? Because as you mentioned, right, isolation definitely plays a role. Lack of socialization is also another role, and also like if you're undocumented, contacting like therapists or like particular community services may not be as accessible unless you fit into like a category, like if you're a survivor of gender-based violence. So I think that that's also like an added barrier to accessibility, but there are a few things that that are free that could be of use, some resources. I've been using two apps and I've been suggesting it to some folks who can't pay a copay. Um, and so one of them is actually Calm, and then the
I'm
other
gonna
one,
pin it here on while
oh,
we talk. So it's called Calm C.
ALM.
Okay.
Yeah, so Calm, it's a really great app. I do it. It's usually because of the COVID situation, they've been providing like free accessibility on the app. Its membership is usually around like it's kind of expensive. It's like $70 a year, but right now
Free
it's free
accessibility for.
for like mindfulness techniques, grounding strategies. There's even like sleep meditation, guided meditation. There's even storytelling to kind of like help you go to sleep or like soothe whatever symptoms you've like someone may be experiencing during this time. And there's also music that can help you with like focus, with depression, and with anxiety too.
Love it. And what was the second app you're using? I'll pin that one as well.
So I think that most of you, I don't know if people have used this, but Headspace is also one that I feel like a lot of people have been using it before, but they are providing like it's free right now. Like you don't have to pay to access any of its programs, and it's kind of similar to Calm, where they have like guided meditations. It's very along the same lines, and what I really enjoy about both of them is that it's no pressure. Like there's someone who is guiding you through each meditation, through each grounding strategy, and they're doing it with you.
Right.
And so I've been using this in the beginning of COVID to kind of like self-soothe myself, right? Because that's not to say that therapists also don't experience vicarious trauma or like anxiety or stress, right? Because it's
Right.
not the same to have in-person connection with your clients. So definitely there is that impact on us as well. And these are some of the things that I've been using to kind of ground myself, and something that I've also been sharing with most of my clients through the last few months.
Oh, that sucks. You can't pin two things at once.
Oh yeah,
Either way, either way, it
yeah.
works out.
Yeah.
Um, so I think you brought up a lot of great things. So let's like sort of unpack.
Mm-hmm.
So let's first talk about immigration and how a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people who are from other parts of the world, whether culturally that mental health is just not seen as like one of the main components of health for them.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of pushback. For example, I'm Haitian American.
Mm-hmm.
My family's from,
Yeah.
and they really don't recognize mental health as something that's a big deal. Like they don't really see like
Mm-hmm.
depression as a big deal. They're like they kind of use like other things to replace like feelings. I
Mm-hmm.
also feel like because there's so much trauma within the Haitian community, personally,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
easier to just avoid and to like use religion or other sort of like coping
Mm-hmm.
mechanisms to like sort of heal themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I can say like in my household, like mental health was never a conversation, and it's just
Yeah.
important. And I think that like when you come to America, right, and you're like
Mm-hmm.
let's say my mom, right, she came to America, she became a single mother, and she's like trying to survive, she's trying to build income, she's trying to find a job, she's trying to learn a new language, she's trying to assimilate into a completely new culture. It's like I could see how mental health could just like fall behind on the list of things
Mm-hmm.
that she has to pay attention to. So what are some of the things that you're seeing in like
Mm-hmm.
connections that you're seeing between immigration and mental health, and like
Mm-hmm.
what how can you help people that are kind of going through that?
Yeah, so I think what you just shared is it's I feel like most of my clients would identify or resonate with that, because it's true. Basic needs need to be met before you can even talk about mental health. Like if you are experiencing like eviction, if you don't have like a job, if there's no basic food and essentials in your fridge, like that's survival. That's a basic need that needs to be met. So I think that um, like making resources more accessible. So something that I've used, because a lot of people, when we're doing therapy, it's really hard to even get into the nitty-gritty of like processing the trauma, or like even talking about what's bothering them, because their basic needs are not being met. So the way I approach things, and I believe that it's very similar to what a lot of therapists recognize, is that basic needs, it's fundamental, and it needs to be met before you can even address any other stages, right? So um, in these past few months, it's been a lot of that, a lot of like, how am I going to pay for my rent? How am I going to survive? How am I going to take care of my children? Securing like a babysitter, or you know, like having like a caretaker to help them. So what's been great is that and the I believe it's NYC Well, and like other initiatives through the mayor's office have made a lot of pages public, where they've allocated resources that a lot of therapists use to refer to like community-based organizations, where they can access food, where they can access like the pantries, or like clothing. Um, I think that that's something that I've been doing to kind of meet that basic need for the clients. And then when it comes to like mental health, I what I always try to do is kind of like connect the two, like how, you know, you are being impacted by the current circumstances of the situation. Like this is a result, like this is why you're experiencing anxiety. So kind of really taking it step by step to really meet the person where they're at. And also, you know, every individual has their coping mechanisms, right? Whether it's her like what is it, like herbs and stuff, like apothecary that they use to kind of soothe themselves, whatever works for them. I would say use that as buy-in to kind of like work with them, because that is something that soothes them, whether it's even like religion. I know that some clients even use that to kind of get through difficult moments, and a lot of the folks that I've been working with have been using religion to kind of like ground themselves, because it gives them hope.
Right.
So I think also work with what they have too, because those are strengths that can get them through these difficult times. So that's kind of like the conversations that I have with them, and also that I've been seeing a lot, not only from myself, but also with colleagues who work with youth who are undocumented, or immigrant folks who are experiencing this at firsthand. So yeah, it's definitely something that has been very present during this time.
So I guess my follow-up question is like
Hmm.
it like, and I'm sure people want to know, if they're undocumented and they're kind of sort of wanting to seek therapy,
Hmm.
will their status be impacted in any way, especially in a negative way? Like, can they, like, and not only that, but what are the well, I think you've provided free resources, but
Hmm.
should anyone undocumented be afraid to seek therapy because they feel like their status would be impacted in a negative light?
Yeah, so their status would definitely not be impacted in any. Can you hear me? I
Yeah,
received an incoming call.
it's okay.
Okay. Um, so yeah, so definitely their status will not be impacted, but I think that's something that we want to normalize, is that there is a lot of fear about talking about mental health, especially if it's something that's not really talked about or discussed in your family. So it can take some time. It takes a lot of courage to even make that call, or to even ask for support. So I would say no, it will not impact your immigration status. However, there is still like that fear about like, what is it like for me to seek that support if you're not getting that support from like your immediate family, because it's something that's not really talked about. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that there are some resources that are free. Like I know that we talk about NYC Well, that you can text them and you can call them that and that they're open 24/7, right? But I think that having something that is consistent, like a therapist, is beneficial because you're building a relationship with them. I think that the fear that comes with that is like, what if I don't have the means to pay for this? What if I can't afford it? Which is something that I've definitely seen and even heard from some of my clients. There are definitely organizations that do tailor like holistic approaches in therapy where it is free, like Sanctuary for Families, where we do provide like free services. And there's like numerous other organizations, but again, I think that it's a very, I think that the downside of it is that you either have to meet a certain like criteria in order to access the resource. So like if you don't identify as a survivor of gender-based violence, that may hinder you from like accessing this free like this free service at a CBO. So I think that it's definitely a barrier, and I'm like a huge advocate for having like full accessibility no matter your status. And I hope that this does come true like in the future because it's so like pivotal, it's so important. Mental health is physical health, right? Everything all in one.
Yeah. So two things. So one, what about the people who have language barriers? Like they want
Hmm.
themselves, right? But they're from
Yeah.
a country, so they don't know the right terms to use to really express their feelings, and
Hmm.
that can be very intimidating as an.
Yeah.
I could just imagine, like, I don't know this language, but I have all this stuff that I want to say. I have all these feelings. And I'm
Yeah.
afraid that this person might not understand me at a point in my life where I feel already misunderstood. So,
Yeah.
what are some resources for that, if there any?
Yeah. So from my knowledge, I know that there are some therapists and even in community-based organizations where they do provide services in different languages. I know that at Sanctuary we provided in Mandarin, Urdu, French, Arabic, Spanish, English, and I believe that I'm missing like two more languages. So we are. I think that this is another thing that needs to be pushed for because not a lot of organizations, especially nonprofits, have the capacity like to to have like bilingual services or to have like the designated nine languages that are most predominantly spoken in the city to provide the service to folks. And so I think that some resources would again be that I can think of. I would just say NYC Well because they do have those languages written down. And in terms of like like nationally, I can't really think of some from the top of my head, but there are definitely like if we go on nyc.gov or like 311, there are that's another way where you can access their portal and look for specific organizations with languages. So it could be able to narrow it down by borough, which is also pretty good. And sometimes most of them do offer a sliding scale fee or like no fee at all, depending your situation and if you're able to like advocate for yourself, which could be another barrier because of the language.
So
Yeah.
that's something else about, like, and correct me if I'm wrong. Like meeting people where they are, and how, like, if they don't have their, like, basic needs in order, like food and water and home, like clothes, that
Hmm.
they can't really focus on mental health. But doesn't that come hand in hand? I mean, I think that mental health is a basic need,
Yeah.
and it is, like, if
Hmm.
you, like, for example, like, I could just imagine, like, if I didn't have, like, my
Hmm.
mental health together, I can't problem solve correctly, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
if I'm freaking out, I'm
Hmm.
depressed, I have high anxiety because, like,
Hmm.
I don't have a place to live, I don't have clothes, I don't know where my next meal is.
Hmm.
I can't accurately problem solve because
Hmm.
I I'm literally, like, not really here. Like, I'm not here.
Hmm.
like I'm not at my best mental health. So
Mm-hmm.
like, how can we start to change or normalize that
Mm-hmm.
sort of like thinking that like let's get your basic needs in order, food, water, da, da, and not including, and like how can we include like
Mm-hmm.
mental health in that sort of like basic needs area?
Yeah. No, yeah, totally. I think I didn't accurately like I feel like I missed a huge point when I mentioned that. But yes, so mental health is as you said, it is a basic need, and it should be like a right? And so I think that when, like, you're right, there's definitely clients who, like, in my experience working with clients, we definitely see that depression, for instance, it doesn't let you like focus because there's so much going on that it's very difficult to make certain decisions, like let alone how to make a decision because there's no support. I think that it's so important that therapists are trauma informed when they're working with clients, because that's one way to like understand not just the micro level of the work, but you're also looking at from like a systemic approach, like from a systems approach, where you see, okay, if this person doesn't have accessibility to mental health, or if this person doesn't have accessibility to like housing support, this is going to put them in a very vulnerable situation. So how can we work together to make a plan with the person? So I do think that it's important for therapists to be trauma informed, and to not, and to also like normalize, hey, like I understand that this is what you're struggling with. I understand that this is like a very vulnerable position right now because it's difficult for you to know what to focus on. Everything is like so disorganized because you need that additional support. It's also, I think that we may not have like time for this conversation, but there's also, I think, whether the person is also ready to like commit, because sometimes it could be hard. Maybe their circumstances do not allow them to commit, right? And that's okay. Like we can also like normalize, like, hey, like I understand that right now it's not feasible for you because you're going through X, Y, and Z. It might be hard. So I think that it's a lot of normalization of what you're experiencing, a lot of normalization that I get what you're experiencing, and it's really hard. What can we do together to create a plan that works for you, or that seems manageable? It doesn't have to be something big, but it can be something very small, to kind of see progress with them as well.
I think another thing, a misconception that I hear a
Hmm.
lot from like people that I'm like, I think you should go to therapy, and I think everyone should go to therapy, right?
Yeah.
That's the memo. Everyone should go to
Hmm.
therapy, everyone should go. But I think that people think that, oh, I talked to this one person, they sucked. They didn't get me at all. I'm never
Hmm.
going to therapy again. Therapy doesn't work. But I
Hmm.
always tell people like it's like shoe shopping. You have to try it on. You have to
Hmm.
try on multiple pairs, look at yourself in the mirror, see, this
Hmm.
is the one I like more than the others. This size fits better. I think I just want to hear like what are your thoughts about shopping for therapists? Like it shouldn't be just like, oh, I went to one and now I think therapy doesn't work at
Hmm.
all. I think that, we have to sort of have these conversations of like the first person you talk to,
Yeah.
it's like going on a date. The first person you go on a date
Hmm.
with isn't going to be like the best person ever. You got to keep going out there, keep trying, keep going to new places and
Yeah.
figuring out like what it is you enjoy, what it is you would want from a therapist
Hmm.
and how you would want a therapist to understand you before you find the right one.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. It what I think about it is that, you have the right to also say no. I don't, like, you can give it a try, right? But therapy is voluntary, so it's not like something that you have to stick with. If you're not feeling comfortable, it's in your right to say like, okay, this isn't working for me. It's a really tough conversation because you're telling, maybe you've been working with a therapist for like 3 months, and then you realize like, hey, I feel like I'm not getting I feel like I'm not getting what I need, or maybe you don't know what you need, and that's okay too. when people enter therapy, it's part of like also like exploring what their needs are, exploring like even how to express what those needs are and what works for them. I do encourage people to like if they can to go on psychology. There's a website that I use a lot, especially when I'm making referrals, when they've completed services with me, but I feel like they need more long term. It's psychology.com. I'm not sure if folks are familiar with this, but it's a really great resource. You get to see the person's profile, you get to see their certificates, and they usually have like a narrative piece of what they do. If you want someone who can resonate with you like culturally, that's another important piece. I think that to me that's also like super important, and that is also included in their narratives as well. So yeah, shopping for therapists, I think it takes a lot of research, right? But also like it's also in your right to say like I don't feel comfortable, and to not be afraid to say that because it's for you. So I definitely do encourage people to do that. And I always normalize like if this didn't work out, like hey, like try a different resource, or talk to friends, if you feel comfortable to share some of the experiences that you're going through, and if they have some resources that they can share with you. So yeah, breaking the stigma on that, I think it's huge, and it should be a continuing conversation, like shopping for a therapist, or how can I look for a therapist that is right for me.
I love that. So what would you say? And I think that for me,
Hmm.
and I'm not sure if anyone else can resonate with this, but I think for me the hardest part about
Hmm.
actually like wanting to seek therapy was the fact that I I felt like I had to like tell my parent a lot of things
Hmm.
that triggered me or traumatized
Hmm.
me, or just like difficulties that kind of like bled into my adulthood.
Hmm.
And then I would have to admit that I was going to therapy, right? And then I have to have the conversation that I'm going to therapy with someone who doesn't really understand mental health. So, what would you say to someone right now who wants to go to therapy but doesn't necessarily have the support system at home to continue like the conversation? You know, maybe the therapist isn't culturally aware and doesn't know that their
Hmm.
parent would not understand, and now they're like, well, I think you should go back home and talk to your parent about this. And it's kind of
Hmm.
like, you know, maybe more painful to like try to like
Hmm.
talk to someone who not only doesn't
Yeah.
believe that mental health is a big deal, but also doesn't see why you're talking to a therapist, and maybe sees it as like, oh, you're telling
Hmm.
other people are a home business, or like, you know, just
Hmm.
regular parenting,
Hmm.
sometimes closed-mindedness towards like therapy in general.
Yeah.
How would you, what sort of advice do you have?
Yeah. Wow, that's really it's really really hard because I think that I also experienced it at firsthand too. When I started seeking therapy. So that's another thing. Therapists also see therapists.
I love that.
Yeah, and so yeah, it's really hard because I think that it's easy for someone to shut down when they don't have that immediate support, especially if it's from a parent. Um, and and I think that something that helped me in the process of like telling my parents that I'm in therapy to process a lot of like stuff that I didn't feel comfortable telling them, was I was writing down kind of like words that just came to mind. So like writing down what I wanted to say and then rereading it and not pressuring myself to, but not like pressuring myself like, hey, I need to tell my parents. So I think that there's also like that added pressure or that added like expectation that people have. But also I would also say if you if you feel like you want to have that conversation with a loved one, I would the way I would frame it is like, I'm seeing someone who's been helping me navigate a lot of challenges that I feel are very hard for me to like express or like articulate. But I just wanted you to know, like, you know, in case you want them to just be aware, but it's also in your power and control, if you can, to not disclose that information to them, because you also don't want to add pressure that might be anxiety inducing to like even have that conversation, especially if you notice that there's like a little bit of like resistance to it, or to like the idea of therapy. So I would use like in very like general terms, have, have a conversation with yourself about what do you think the outcome would look like if you have this conversation with your loved one? Do you have any expectations of what the conversation might result in? So kind of like weighing out like your pros and cons of how the conversation might look like, as a way to kind of like
Right.
guide you to begin it.
So also, do you agree with this? Like, maybe it's just okay that they don't understand it, but you spoke your truth anyway. For those parents who are like super against mental health, or like super
Mm-hmm.
against just like seeking or speaking to their children about how they're really feeling, it's
Mm-hmm.
okay that they don't understand, right? Wouldn't you say that? Like, it's okay. Like, I think that I mean, at least for me, I had to just get to a point
Mm-hmm.
where I'm just telling you, look, I am speaking to someone
Mm-hmm.
about the traumas that I've been through. I'm not blaming you. I just want you to be aware. These are some of
Yeah.
the things that I want to talk to you about. And it's okay that you don't want, it's okay that she doesn't, or they don't want to have that conversation with me. But at
Mm-hmm.
least I told my truth on my end.
Yeah.
And I think that's like I think it's okay to sort of promote that. Like, it's okay
Mm-hmm.
to be misunderstood by your support system, by your parents, especially if they're immigrants and don't necessarily believe in mental health, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a cultural difference, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think I say this all the time. A lot of people who are immigrants had to prioritize survival. They didn't and they didn't think
Mm-hmm.
survival meant mental health. And
Mm-hmm.
so we, like, who are younger, or maybe just like have the opportunity and really the privilege to actually be thinking about
Mm-hmm.
our mental health, like, it's okay that we
Yeah.
want to share that with them, but it's also okay if they're not in the
Mm-hmm.
headspace to even understand it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So yes, I am for like speaking your truth and like standing in your truth. I feel like that's something that I also like had to navigate because of the stigma. And it's really hard because it, it's really hard to say that it's okay that they don't understand, because maybe deep down inside you want them to
Right.
understand,
Of
because
course.
maybe to some extent you also see that they're struggling with their mental health, right?
Exactly.
For survival, and then it's really hard, and it takes like I think it's very courageous to come to the point and say like, hey, I think I'm okay that maybe my support system doesn't see this as like support, doesn't see that seeing a therapist is support, but I think that I'm okay because I see the changes in me. I'm breaking patterns. I'm learning or reparenting myself. I'm learning about myself. I'm learning about my mental health.
Right.
So it kind of like empowers you to like be in an empowered position to take control of your mental health, and like also start making decisions for yourself. So I think it's very courageous to come to that point where you accept, right? That acceptance piece, because it's so hard. And this is also like a continued conversation that I have with some of my clients who are youth and or who are young adults, and want their parents to seek therapy because there's like a shared trauma, or
Right.
and there's like this not resistance, but it may be like avoidance, like
Right.
avoiding not to open a can of worms that might be difficult to close later on, which is
Hmm.
also equally important.
Right.
And so I think that I do encourage people like to take you know, to be brave if they can, and if in their power, right? Be brave, and it's okay to say, hey, if they don't want to support me, I it's okay. I'm not holding like a grudge. I empathize, if anything. I
Right.
understand. I think it's just brave to like be able to identify that. So I'm all for um, for like speaking your truth, trusting your truth, and like also like trusting yourself.
So one of the things you talked about, which I love, is that therapists look for therapists.
Hmm.
Therapists needs therapy, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
therapists are not perfect beings. They still need to
Hmm.
do check-ins with themselves. They still need to reflect. So can you tell me two things? Like first of all, what interests you into in mental health? Like what made you want to become a therapist? One. And
Hmm.
two, like what are some of the things that you look for as a therapist in other therapists, if that makes sense?
Ah, yes, yes. Okay. Okay, so what made me so I think what made me really like get into therapy, it's kind of weird because I didn't see myself as a clinician um at all. I went to school not to do therapy. I went to school to like basically create a program that can serve immigrant folks. Like that was
Okay.
really like my passion.
Okay.
But then I noticed there was a challenge because it's like, who am I to assume that these are their needs? Like, why
Right.
I need to work with them directly to so that they can tell me what they need, which is what I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing now in the last 2 years that I've been working at Sanctuary for Families. What I thought was what I assumed was a need, is really not what they've expressed to me in like individual sessions. So that really is kind of like the push that keeps me in the trauma field of working with folks. And like it has allowed me to really think out the box and be creative with how can other organizations be trauma informed, and the importance of being trauma informed. It's so important because with me, I always look at all the systems that are involved and how they're impacting their mental health. So
Right.
I look at what starts above directly to like the individual. And some therapists, um, like just some in the few that I've met or interacted with, they look at the bottom up. So they look at the individual and up. So I
Right.
I kind of see it from both ends.
Love that.
Yeah, so I think so that's kind of like what keeps me in the work and why I like love therapy. And I was kind of scared because I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna love it. Like I don't know. But honestly, I if anything feel very honored to work with folks for allowing me to listen to their stories. And for something that I always tell them is like, hey, like, if you give me permission, like, or if you give me consent, I like to be part of that journey with you to process this together, because I know that it can feel very alone to process trauma, especially if there's no support systems, right?
Right.
Or if you're undocumented and have no family here. So I think there's that exchange that happens within therapy. So that's like kind of like one for me. And then the second question about like what do I look in other therapists? That's kind of hard because I think I just what I really value is like putting yourself in my shoes.
Empathy.
I Yes, empathy. I also value like I like when I'm being challenged, right? In therapy, I like when I'm being held accountable. Like if I see that I'm repeating certain patterns, like please tell
That you
me.
already identified, right?
Yes, that I've already identified, please tell me.
Right.
I also really, what I look into a therapist is like that cultural like awareness, or even like your willingness to be culturally aware,
Right.
or to like, be inquisitive and like inquire about my culture, right? And how does that also play a role in my mental health, or how does it play a role in the patterns that I'm repeating, right? So that's kind of like what I look like in a therapist. Yeah.
So last question. I don't want to keep this going for too long, but I really
Uh-huh.
like the perspective that you look at therapy from the top to the bottom and then from the
Hmm.
bottom to the top. So
Hmm.
what are some general sort of themes within immigration and mental health that you recognize since you've been talking to people and kind of viewing it from a very general sense that you feel like you can create maybe a program or some programs that need to be created for those individuals? Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So, something that I feel that that I would like to see in a program, kind of like similar to what the Brave House is already providing, right? Like a space for like young adolescents, right? But also I'm thinking about something for adults, right? Who have experienced severe trauma, a space that is also tailored to them, where there is like childcare
Hmm.
available, where there is like ESL classes, where there
Right.
is like community dinners, or like,
Nice.
yeah, like I'm not sure, like I'm still like kind of brainstorming. What I also think that could be helpful too is like having a psychiatrist on staff, like a psychiatrist like at a position who is available when someone is like experiencing, I don't know, like certain symptoms, or if they want to be evaluated by them further, if they feel comfortable, or for like even psychiatrists to like give information on like medications that they're already taking, because a lot of folks that I've been working with are prescribed medication, and sometimes don't know why they're taking it. And I think that that's problematic, because they have the right to say no to the medication. They
Right.
also have the right to be informed about like what it is. How can it
Right.
affect you long term? Is this short term? So I think that it's important to like just have that education too, and to like normalize, hey, like these are medications that some folks take when they're experiencing anxiety, when they're experiencing like panic attacks or like depression, and this is how it can affect you in the long run, and this is how it can affect you in short term. So I think I kind of imagine something where that's available, where it is funded through the city, and it is free for our immigrant folks, because that's also, it costs a lot of money to like be evaluated, and not, not everybody is insured to pay for that. So I kind of like envision something like a one stop in the future, but also like for adults. And although there are some programs that are available, it's kind of like a consistency that needs to be within every borough, not just in like Manhattan.
Right.
Like I want to see it like in Brooklyn, like in Queens, like in Staten Island,
Right.
like in the Bronx, like everywhere. Like by accessibility, it needs to be in the community too.
Last question.
Uh-huh.
What, how, let me form it correctly.
Uh-huh.
How can we support? Because I just feel like it's traumatic, no matter how
Mm-hmm.
positive the experience was or was not, traveling from another country to another
Mm-hmm.
country and having to like rebuild your entire sense of self, I
Mm-hmm.
think can be very traumatic. And
Yeah.
are there programs to help, like, for example, like let's say you are incarcerated, right? I know that
Mm-hmm.
there are certain programs that help that person who is incarcerated reassimilate themselves into society. There's
Mm-hmm.
not enough, but I know that
Yeah.
they do have programs for that. Is
Mm-hmm.
there a program for people who are coming from other countries to like literally just talk about the process that they've been through in their country, and now that they're in a new country, like
Mm-hmm.
processing that and processing and like assimilating into a new country? Because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that is very tough, and I think
It
that
is.
people who are immigrants don't have other people to talk to besides other immigrants about, like, look, this,
Mm-hmm.
I just had to like live in a shelter for 5 years before I could
Mm-hmm.
get a job. I had to like struggle and like be a busboy, or I was in a
Mm-hmm.
concentration camp, or whatever the it's not a concentration camp. That's not what they're calling it, but you get the gist of
Mm-hmm.
what
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
a detention center, I guess.
Detention centers,
That's
yeah.
now it's not a concentration.
Yeah.
To me it's like all the same, because
Mm-hmm.
they're not being provided the resources that they need there. uh,
Yeah.
but do you think that's important? Like, I think that's something that needs to be happening.
Yeah, yeah. To be honest, I don't know if there are any organizations that do that, particularly like in processing like the trauma of like like coming to a country, or like being forcibly displaced from your country, and then having to like come to the United States, right? I did work for this organization called the International Rescue Committee, where they work with refugees and immigrants to help them resettle in the United States.
Love that.
So yeah, so there are like some resettlement programs, and the one that I am like most familiar with is the IRC, the International Rescue Committee. The thing is that I think when I think that it's also important to kind of like identify what does the resettlement process look like in a program, because if resettlement is like access to resources, okay, we're covering that part, but then what about the mental health aspect? Like if you're talking to a social worker who is helping you resettle or connecting you to like to schools or to like food pantries, right? I think that it's also important to have the social worker like talk about like what a shock it might be to like be forced to kind of like assimilate in the United States because of something that occurred in their country. So I don't know of too many programs who are doing that. But I feel like if there is, then there's not enough, because not a lot of there I'm not really informed of any program who is doing that, who is like solely processing on what that adjustment piece looks like for folks. So that is actually like great to like perhaps advocate for, or like to continue to like bring into conversation, like how can a program be created that is specifically tailored to that. But yeah, so I think that there's so much with the resettlement process, and also like what is the person's expectations, like what do they want, because I feel like there's a lot of fear, like even to like say what is their need, like there's still a lot of fear, even if they don't understand something, there's still a lot of fear, right? And I think that it's our responsibility as those who are privileged with the language to act at the language, but also to access these connections and these resources to inquire about that. So yeah, that's I like that. I like that about the resettlement process, and for it to be more.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining. I know
Yeah.
it up, but I think this is just important conversations
Hmm.
because a lot of people don't talk about it.
It's
um,
true. Yeah.
Mental health. We need people who are helping us assimilate to like the culture. We need people who are culturally aware enough that are like
Hmm.
about people of different cultures that are like therapists.
Yeah.
People to know that therapists do need therapists. We need people to know that finding a therapist is not like a one-stop shop. You might have to shop around.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
okay if you want a continuation of therapy because you can't afford it or whatever the case may be. But it's
Hmm.
okay to go one time if you're really struggling. There are
Yeah.
resources right now. A lot of
Hmm.
it was talked about in the chat.
Hmm.
Headspace. I know that
Yeah.
someone asked a question about if they had areas within the app for children 18, I think 18.
Yeah.
There is
Oh
a
yeah.
um,
Hmm.
I just want to scan through some of the resources we talked about. Zen Care. Um, let's see what else came up. Because I just want people to know that there are so many things that you can reach out. Um,
Oh yeah. Would the apps work for children 8 through 13? Yes, they do. Yes.
yeah,
I
I
know
think
that.
Zen
Yes.
Care helps you find therapists.
Mm-hmm.
Psychology.com.
Mm-hmm. Oh, NYC public hospitals provide free therapy, and there are organizations that provide it free. Okay,
Awesome.
that's awesome.
Yeah, this is the type of stuff that I feel like people are searching for and they just don't know. It's not out there as much as we think it is, especially free resources. People feel
Mm-hmm.
like therapy is so expensive and they can't afford it, especially
Mm-hmm.
if you're undocumented or an immigrant or just like without a job right now because it's COVID and they're telling you to
Yeah.
um
This is
I
amazing. I
think
love that everyone
their
shared.
families, NYC well. Yeah, I was looking at it the whole time. So many great resources here.
Wow. Yeah, this is awesome. Oh, I love it. This is really
Mm-hmm.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, like just for having this space to like invite people and like this is like really what community looks like sharing these resources and like engaging and like also there's so many people who might be familiar with certain processes, right? I I am also like no expert, right? But just from my knowledge and like integrating some of these resources and seeing how it has been effective, like I love to spread the word because it is true. I think that there still continues to be like so much stigma when it comes to mental health, but I think platforms like this, like it breaks that stigma, like it's
Right.
interrupting that cycle, right? So thank you so much.
No, thank you for all your work as a
Hmm.
therapist, and all the
Hmm.
family that you help. And I think that we need people like us everywhere. And there
Hmm.
are people like us here, right here, listening
Hmm.
and sharing these resources. So thank you for joining us on this
Hmm.
of the Brave Pod. Uh,
Yeah.
please come again. And yeah, I hope you guys have a happy Friday. And yeah,
Yeah.
bye
Thank you
guys.
so much. Bye.